World War II shaped the lives of a generation. The war broke families apart, brought communities together, and turned a depressed economy into an industrial machine. On the home front, citizens sold war bonds and collected scrap metal for the factories. Friends were made and lost as a generation of boys was sent into combat. Penn State Public Broadcasting invited those who lived this history to share their stories of World War II.
I'm Iris Franco, and I am one of the many women who married members of the United States Armed Forces during World War II. In other words, I'm a war bride. Women in England were registered for war work in the same way that men were. I did not have to change my occupation because before the war I was working in a textile laboratory where we tested yarns and fabrics. And in about 1938, actually before the war started, we switched over to testing mainly yarns and fabrics which were to be made into parachutes. So during the war I stayed with my regular job and stayed at home. Where I lived was about 45 miles northeast of London, and it was considered a safe town. We were lucky in that I was in a place where the planes were the German planes were mainly going overhead, going to somewhere else. We weren't that important. They weren't very interested in bombing Braintree. But we had a lot of air raid warnings simply because they were moving in one direction or back. Most of the bombs that we had in the area were from planes that were being chased by fighters, and then they would drop their load. But we didn't have many deaths because the town was surrounded by agricultural land. Most of them landed safely. The main thing was the lack of everything. The amount of food coupons we got was sort of pitiful. Again, we were lucky. We had a very large garden. My father had fruit and they had vegetables that he was growing. How the people in the city managed, I don't know. Sometimes the ration would be 1 egg per person per week. The meat ration was minimal. It was helped out very much because we did receive things like powdered eggs, baked beans, and probably many other things from the United States. Before the United States even entered the war, you were helping us very much with our food. All right, it wasn't exciting. It was a lot of baked beans on toast, scrambled eggs on toast made with powdered eggs, but it was food. And also clothing, the coupon situation, and also the quality of clothing dropped very much. We used to have very good woolens, and they just seemed, I guess everything was going for Army uniforms. It just seemed to disappear. And it was just really the dreariness, I think I would have to say, about the war years, when nothing got done, you know, everything was going to the war effort. And also the blackout was depressing. It was, luckily sometimes there was full moon and it would be nice to be out. But I would say it was just hanging on, listening to the war news all the time, and for so long things seemed to be going so badly and became rather depressing. Though we went to a lot of movies, we went to a lot of dances, and sort of made the best of things. I worked, or volunteered, I should say, for the Red Cross. They had set up a place where the soldiers could go, get a decent meal, relax, listen to music, and they had asked for volunteers in the town to staff it, helping serve the meals and bust the tables, talk to anybody who wants to talk, and I had volunteered for that. And also they had set up dances in the local school. And it was at one of the dances that I met my husband. He asked me to dance. We talked a little bit. It was Friday night, and he asked me to meet him on Monday, and I did, and that was the start of us being together. He was attached to the 12th Evacuation Hospital. What they were doing in England at the time was the Irish had built the hospitals mainly in our area, Irish labour, because Ireland was neutral, and we had very few men left. They were all away. And what his unit was doing was moving in and furnishing them with everything that was needed for a hospital. His unit spent only 6 weeks, in Braintree, where I came from, and he'd already been there 3 weeks when I met him. So 3 weeks after I met him, he moved on to the same job in another place. But we kept in touch through letters, mainly, and also visited a couple of times. I met him in May, and in November we became engaged. And in the new year, we decided it might be a good idea to get married, because everybody could see that the Second Front in Europe was coming. And so that's what we decided. Anyway, not that it was that easy, because the American forces didn't really want their men marrying anyone in the countries, in countries outside the United States, I guess. But he filled in, he applied for the paperwork, got it all done, got it approved. And I went ahead and had the banns called in our church in Braintree. He was to come down, and we were to get married on April the 21st. A couple of days before that, I get a telegram, all leaves are cancelled. He can't come down. So I thought, well, that's maybe the end of this. But there were 4 Red Cross workers attached to the hospital. And one of them, Rosamond Tatro, decided this wedding was going to take place. She went to work. She got a special license from the bishop, because it was a rush case, and a special license for the bishop. She fixed up the church. She had ordered plants to make it look decorative. She wanted to tie ribbons onto the pews, but the vicar didn't agree with that. He didn't think that was a good idea at all. But anyway, she arranged for just my mother and I to go up to the north of England, where they were then stationed, and somewhere for us to stay. And the next day we were married, which was April 27th, and it just so happens that it was my husband's 32nd birthday. At the time that we married, they were stationed in Sale, Cheshire, which is a very lovely town. Shortly after that, the unit was moved down to the south coast. They were an evacuation hospital, which means they received the wounded straight from wherever they were injured. And they set up, with, I imagine, several more hospitals right along the south coast of England, ready to receive wounded back from D-Day. And the hospital operated there from D-Day into July, receiving wounded from France. Then they moved to Normandy and moved on through Luxembourg, and they were attached to General Patton's Third Army. And they followed up the Third Army through into Germany. They received wounded from the Battle of the Bulge, and on to, I think their final stop was Frankfurt. And when the war ended, that was where they were. And my husband had to leave shortly after that, in the fall of 45, it would have been, and came home, and he had a 7-day leave, which he overstayed. He didn't go back for 14 days. And by the time he got back, the unit had dispersed. Some had gone home, some had been moved to other units, and he was attached to one group after another until finally he left from Marseille and got back to the United States shortly before Thanksgiving of 1945. In the meantime, I had managed to get my passport and was waiting because the United States Army decided that they were going to move these hundreds of women that they had to get into the United States. And in January of 46, I was still working when I got the telegram to please be at Waterloo Station at a certain time. And I made it. My parents took me down. I didn't realize really how they felt about this until that day, because I saw my father cry that day, and I had never seen him cry before. But I went on my way onto the Queen Mary, and 6 days later we were in New York Harbor. We were the last ones to get off the Queen Mary. They shipped out the ones that were going on train journeys earlier in the day. Coming to the harbor was also something, to see the Statue of Liberty and the coastline of Long Island. And we were looking, and there were these big cars, along the big, and also New York City at night was a revelation with all the lights and the bridges lit. It was a beautiful sight. At night, we were taken to an armory. Our husbands were there to meet us. And as they recognized us, they were upstairs, I remember, and we were all in the hall downstairs. The groups from close by, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York. As they recognized us, they were able to come down and greet us. I had never seen my husband out of uniform. He had on a winter overcoat, way down, big hat. He was of Italian descent, and to me he looked like an Italian gangster. I looked at him and I thought for a minute, what have I done? Well, everything worked out just fine. His family was very welcoming. Oh, by the way, one of his sisters was an army nurse, and she was stationed in England for quite near to my hometown for a while, so I had met her a couple of times in England. So I had met one member of the family. But I have to say his family was very welcoming, and I settled down in New York for many years and had my family there before I came to Pennsylvania. And we were married for 53 years before he died in 1998. And he was a good man. It was a good marriage, good life.